Hey everyone, and welcome back to Retro Legends. In the early 90s, there was a game console that didn't play by the same rules as the others. It didn't try to be easy to get. It didn't try to compete on price. It didn't even try to fit into the market. Its goal was different. It wanted to bring the arcade home. No compromises. It was called the Neo Geo. For many, it was the most powerful thing you could get. For others, it was too much. Too expensive to matter. But was that idea right? Was the Neo Geo really so much better than other consoles of its time? And most importantly, how much would a machine with those features cost today? To answer that, we need to look not just at the parts inside, but also at the world it was made in. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell for more trips into the world of retro gaming. Let's get started. In the late 1980s, the difference between arcade games and home games wasn't just about selling things. It was about how they were built. Arcades used a system where they could always update their machines. Arcade circuit boards could be swapped out or changed pretty quickly, letting them get better and better all the time. This meant game makers could use more power, both in memory and how fast the computer could work. Home game consoles did the opposite. They were made to last a long time with the same parts inside and at a low price. This put clear limits on them. Less memory, not as good graphics, and everything had to be made to fit within what they could afford to make. So, home games couldn't be exactly like arcade games. The versions made for home were the link between the two, but they also showed how different the technology was. Game makers had to make animations simpler, backgrounds less detailed, and fewer things on the screen. In many cases, whole parts of the game or ways to play were taken out to make the game work on the console. This led to versions that kept the main idea of the game, but weren't as good in quality. This difference also changed how people saw things. The arcade was linked to a more advanced and immediate experience, while home gaming offered easy access and continuous play, but with clear trade-offs. Moving from one setting to another meant losing some quality, which became an accepted standard. SNK stepped in and changed this model by starting with a different idea. Instead of making games fit weaker hardware, they designed a home system that directly shared the same features as the arcade machines. This meant they didn't need to convert games in the usual way, keeping the game's technical structure the same across both setups. The Neo Geo was designed as a single platform, with differences only in its physical form and how it was used. The MVS system, for arcades, and the AES, for homes, shared the same technical foundation, the same CPU, the same graphics setup, and the same memory management. The differences were mainly in the physical media and the interface, not in how well they performed. This approach meant they didn't need to develop things twice. Games were designed once and released on both platforms without big changes. No adjustments were needed to make them less complex or to remove content. The way they worked stayed the same, as did their look and how the system behaved. The direct result was that both versions were consistent. The arcade experience wasn't changed, it was brought over completely. This made development faster and made it easier for SNK to manage resources, as they could focus their money on one single system. However, this choice came with specific limitations. The hardware wasn't made cheaper for the home version. It stayed the same. This stopped them from saving money in the way traditional consoles do, where parts are changed for the mass market. The size of the cartridges, which used large memory modules, also made production costs higher. The result was a consistent but expensive system. Not making any technical compromises meant a high price for both the hardware and the games, making the Neo Geo a high-end product rather than a widely available platform. Inserting AES cartridge into console. Audible click. The Neo Geo used a setup that, on paper, didn't seem too different from other systems of its time, but it was used in a special way. The Motorola 68000 processor was the main brain for logic and data, while the Z80 handled all the sound. This kept things clear and made the system run more smoothly. The big difference wasn't in how fast the processors were or how they were built, but in the overall design of the graphics system. The Neo Geo was made to handle lots of visual information without slowing down much. The special memory for sprites and the available bandwidth allowed it to show large images while keeping animations smooth and consistent. The system didn't use static tiles in the usual way. Instead, it built most of the picture using many small sprites put together. This meant characters and objects could be treated as separate parts, making animations much more flexible. The number of frames in each animation was higher than average, which made movements look smoother and less choppy. The color depth helped make things look more even. Colors changed smoothly, and how clear the picture was didn't just depend on how much contrast there was, but on how much information was available for each part. This made things easier to see, even with complicated animations. Handling many large sprites at the same time needed a constant flow of data for every frame. The system was built to handle this without big changes in performance. This kept things stable even in scenes with lots of moving parts. Not focusing on 3D wasn't a problem at first. The Neo Geo put all its effort into one specific area, making 2D graphics much better than what was usually available. This focus helped it create a consistent and recognizable look without having to deal with the difficulties of early 3D graphics. The Neo Geo's strength came from how well its memory, sprite handling, and rendering all worked together. It wasn't just one special feature that made it great, but how all the different parts worked as a team without any obvious bottlenecks. The sprites were made with much more detail, not just in size, but in how they were built inside. Each character was made of many parts, with animations broken down into longer sequences. This made movements smoother, and meant they didn't have to reuse frames as much, avoiding the repetitive look you'd see on other systems. Having more data for each animation also allowed for more different in-between states. Transitions between poses looked more natural, making actions easier to understand. This was especially clear in fighting games, where how clear the movement was directly affected how well you understood the game. Color management also helped make things consistent. Being able to use more colors meant they could better define shapes and surfaces, reducing the need for really strong contrasts to tell things apart. Shades were used to separate different visual layers and make things look deeper, even though it was still a 2D world. Visual effects weren't treated as separate things, but were part of the same design. Explosions and particles were handled like extra sprites, keeping the same level of detail and timing with the rest of the scene. This avoided any breaks between the main parts and the smaller ones. The picture stayed stable because the workload was managed carefully. Even with lots of things on screen, the system avoided big changes in how things looked. This helped create a consistent experience where every part seemed to belong together. The result was a look you could spot right away, not because of one single thing, but because every visual element consistently followed the same rules for how it was made and managed. The audio part was made with the same idea as the rest of the system. It focused on good quality sounds and being able to use them in many ways. The Neo Geo didn't mostly use simple sounds, but played digital sounds stored in the game cartridges. These had more data than home systems had back then. This ability directly affected how the music was made. The songs weren't stuck with repeating parts or only a few sound channels. Instead, they could have many layers of sound, with more kinds of instruments and more detailed changes in how loud they were. The music wasn't just there to keep the beat of the action, but helped make each game special. The sound effects followed the same idea. Hits, explosions, and interactions sounded more real because of the detailed sounds, not like the simpler sounds on other systems. This made the impact feel stronger and made it clearer how actions and sounds were connected. The different kinds of sounds came from being able to use various sound samples without having to squeeze them down too much. This helped to tell different sounds apart, stopping them from overlapping and keeping things clear even in the most intense parts of the game. The sound and gameplay worked together directly. Sounds weren't just added as decoration, but were timed with what was happening on screen, helping you understand the events. The way the sights and sounds matched up made the whole experience feel stronger, making the audio an active part of the system instead of just a background helper. The price of the Neo Geo AES was a direct result of its technical setup and SNK's chosen position in the market. Unlike regular home consoles, this system wasn't made to cut costs by simplifying or changing the hardware. The goal was to keep it exactly like the arcade version, bringing all the parts and power directly to the home product. This choice immediately affected the launch price. In Japan, the Neo Geo AES came out in 1990, costing around 58,000 yen. In the United States, the price started between $599 and $649, depending on what was included and when it was sold. In Europe, where it wasn't as widely available, the price was usually between £500 and £600, with some changes due to importing and how easy it was to find. The cost of the games followed the same idea. Neo Geo cartridges were not like those for other consoles in terms of size and how much data they could hold. They used a lot of ROM memory, which was needed to store the exact same stuff as the arcade version. This made them expensive to make, and that showed in the final price. In Japan, games generally sold for anywhere from 20,000 to 30,000 yen. In the United States, prices were between $200 and $300 for a single cartridge. In Europe, costs were often even higher due to importing, sometimes going over £200 per game. These prices weren't just for a short time, they were the standard for the entire life of the system. SNK didn't lower prices over time like other companies did. They stuck to their original pricing strategy. So the Neo Geo AES wasn't made to be super popular. Instead, it was made for high quality and to give you the exact arcade experience at home. The high price wasn't a surprise, it was a direct result of how it was made, focusing on technical perfection rather than being cheap for everyone. If we adjust the original price of the Neo Geo AES for inflation, the system's market position becomes even clearer. The roughly 58,000 yen from its Japanese launch in 1990 would be about 900 to 1,000 euros today. In the United States, the initial $599–649 would now be worth between $1,300 and $1,500. In Europe, the £500–600 from back then would easily be over £1,200–1,400 today, with some changes depending on exchange rates and the exact time period. But the most important thing is the games. Cartridges that sold for $200 to $300 in the 90s would now be equivalent to $400 to $700 for a single game. In Japan, 20,000–30,000 yen would turn into about 300–600 current euros. These numbers mean that each game costs as much as, or even more than, a whole modern console. This high cost was directly linked to how the cartridges were made. Unlike the cheaper storage used by other systems, Neo Geo games had a lot of ROM memory. This was needed to hold the exact same stuff as the arcade versions. There weren't any big reductions or heavy squeezing of data, and this kept production costs high throughout the system's life. From a business point of view, this model was hard to grow. The high cost per unit meant fewer people bought it and kept prices from going down as more were made. However, it did ensure consistent quality. Every game kept the same high technical standard, without compromises for smaller or changed versions. Compared to today's market, the Neo Geo would be a product far above the premium range. Not just because of the initial hardware cost, but for the total price needed to build a game collection. This would make it, even now, a system only available to a small number of people, which fits with its original idea. The Neo Geo held a unique spot in the market, shaped more by its design choices than by competition. It wasn't made to go head-to-head with home consoles in terms of price, how many were sold, or business plans. It always looked to the arcade world, and this focus decided its role. Its technical strengths, especially with 2D graphics, weren't used to grab a bigger piece of the market. Instead, they were used to keep things consistent with arcade standards. This put it in its own category, where a product's worth was judged by how true it was to the arcade experience, rather than how easy it was to get. This naturally meant a smaller audience. The high cost of the system and its games meant only a select group of players, mostly dedicated fans willing to spend more than average, could afford it. This made the system less visible to the general public, but strengthened its image as a specialized product. The limited number of systems sold also affected its game library. There weren't as many games as on rival platforms, but production stayed focused on specific types of games, especially fighting and action titles. This helped keep the games consistent, avoiding games that didn't fit well with the system's design. The Neo Geo's impact wasn't seen in how many units it sold, but in the solutions it offered. Its advanced sprite handling, careful attention to animation quality, and how well its hardware and software worked together set new standards that were later adopted by others. Even its model of having the same game in both arcades and homes, though not directly copied, showed a different way to do things compared to the usual system of converting arcade games for home use. In this way, the Neo Geo was a technical and design benchmark. It didn't change how the market worked, but it helped set a quality bar that other systems were compared against, even if they didn't use its business model. The Neo Geo wasn't just about getting slightly better performance than other consoles. It was built with a design choice that put technical consistency ahead of balancing cost and how widely it would be used. It wasn't made to fit economic or production limits, but to keep the quality of the experience the same no matter where you played it. This approach was clear in how the whole system was managed. The hardware wasn't scaled down for home use, and the software wasn't changed to fit smaller limits. Every part followed the same idea, to stay true to the arcade standard, even if it meant much higher costs. This refusal to compromise wasn't just about performance, but also about how it was made. The game cartridges weren't designed to use less memory, and the game assets weren't simplified to save space. This made all the games consistent, but it also meant they couldn't use more flexible ways of making games. The result was a system that pushed the limits of what was possible in home gaming. It didn't offer middle ground solutions, nor did it try to balance quality with affordability. This made it less competitive in sales, but more clearly defined from a technical standpoint. In terms of its place in the market, the Neo Geo showed an extreme example of the relationship between performance and cost. It didn't aim to be widely popular, but to keep a consistent level of quality, regardless of who might buy it. This choice put it outside the usual market trends, making it an independent system rather than just another option among other consoles. And with that, our trip down memory lane comes to an end. How many of these fun facts did you already know? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for more trips into the world of retro gaming. Thanks for watching Retro Legends, and we'll see you in the next video. Stay retro, stay legends.